Happy Wednesday, back with the Friendship War. We're on chapter 22, and it's called Supply and Demand. The windows along the north wall of the cafeteria face the grassy fields behind the school, and from the table where I'm sitting with Hank, I've got a good view. It was raining this morning, but I know it's sunny, so this is the first time on Wednesday that kids have been allowed outside to play. So how come Grace's Gorgeous Goodies isn't open for business? He asks. What? I said, you're not trading any buttons today. No sign? How come? All right. Taking a break. Hank studies my face a moment and then turns around to stare out the window, because that's what I'm doing. And then he sees what I'm seeing. About 30 fifth and 6th graders are half walking, half running around on the grass, then stopping to stoop down, and then repeating the process over and over. What's going on out there? Yeah, it looks weird, doesn't it? I really can't say more than that, not without lying to Hank, which I don't want to do, because the fact is, I know exactly what's going on out there. Ben was right about economics. It's interesting, especially the part about supply and demand, which was all he really wanted to explain. He was like a college professor or something, completely serious, and yesterday after school our kitchen was his lecture on. The concept of supply and demand is simple. If the supply of something is low, that means there's not much of it around. So it's scarce, but that makes it feel more valuable to people. And the idea that something is valuable, that's called demand, which is basically just the feeling that you want or need something. I had no trouble understanding that, and Ben could tell, so he kept talking. Let's use donuts as an example. Imagine there was just one donut shop in our town, and that one shop made only 2 donuts each morning. That would be a very low supply, right? And because people really love delicious donuts, there would be a lot of people who wanted those 2 donuts, which means there would be a very high demand. And instead of paying 99 cents, a person might be willing to pay much more, maybe even $5 or $10 for one donut. Also, a lot of people might try to be the very first person at the door of the donut shop in the morning to buy a delicious donut, because there are only 2 in the whole town. I was still following along fine, but Ben wanted to be sure, so he flipped the situation around. But what if there were 15 donut shops in one town, and each shop made 1,000 delicious donuts every morning? So would people feel like they had to rush to a donut shop to try to get one? No. And would people be willing to pay $5 for one donut? No, because there's a very high donut supply, 15,000 every morning. And if the supply gets really high like that, what happens to the demand? I've got to get a donut right now feeling. It dies. There might even be so many donuts around that people would get sick of them. So here's the most important idea. A very large supply of anything will kill the demand for that thing, no matter what it is, which is my favorite sentence of this whole economics lesson. Then Ben stops, and he looks me right in the eye. He said the same sentence again, but much more slowly. A very large supply of anything will kill the demand for that thing, no matter what it is. As he'd been talking to me, Ben had also been doodling on a piece of notebook paper, drawing pictures of donuts and shop windows and trees and stuff, which is a little distracting, but I was ready for the rest of his lecture. So that's the end of your economics lesson? Ben said with a smile. What? But you told me I would get an idea, and he put up his hand. Nope, I'm done. And I didn't tell you to do anything. And then Ben slid his doodle paper across the table to me, grabbed his backpack, and walked out of the kitchen. I was left sitting there trying to remember everything he'd said and looking at the little pictures he had drawn. Ben's a terrible artist. A tree isn't that hard to draw, and neither is a shop window, but his pictures were so inaccurate. And I saw that he even messed up drawing something as simple as donuts, because 2 or 3 of his donuts were ridiculously small, and not only that, they had 2 holes instead of 1. Then I saw that my very smart big brother had done. Those weren't small donuts with 2 holes. He had drawn some buttons. But just as Ben had promised, I got an idea about doing something. And it was sort of risky, and it was definitely scary, but I did it anyways. Last night, just after dark, I sneaked out to one of to the house of our garage. I sneaked out of the house to our garage. I had carried 4 boxes of buttons down there from my room before dinner, 3 boxes of small gray buttons, plus 1 box of mixed bright colors. I loaded buttons into my camping backpack, strapped it on, and rode my bike 7 blocks to school. Then I spread those buttons all around the playfield, throwing big handfuls again and again. I rode home, refilled my pack, and rode to school to fling buttons a second time, and then a third and a 4th time. The whole process took more than an hour, and I got back upstairs to my room just before Mom came to say goodnight. So why did I scatter more than 150,000 buttons all over the playground? Because of economics. I did it to change the supply of buttons at Avery Elementary School. By the time I finish my lunch, a crowd of 4th, 5th, and 6th graders are outside, grabbing up buttons, including Hank. It looks like one of those Easter egg hunts on the lawn at the White House. Even from this far away, I can see some bulging pockets stuffed with buttons. According to my brother, the economics professor, increasing the supply of buttons will kill the demand for buttons. That's the theory. But I have successfully launched my real-life experiment, so now I have to wait and see what happens. At the end of the day on Wednesday, it's a fact that now there are many more buttons at school. But they're mostly small and gray, except for about 20,000 of the larger, brightly colored ones. The final bell rings, and 3 5th-grade girls come rushing up to me in the hall outside Mrs. Lang's room to trade their best Ellie's Originals for some of my special buttons. By now, Ellie had figured out what I'd been doing, and she gives me dirty looks on her way past. But these 3 trades are a surprise. I had expected about having so many more buttons that was going to shut off all of the demand, like Ben said. Then I see something. My fancy buttons are still scarce, so they're still in very high demand. And it doesn't matter what, they're surrounded by oceans of ordinary buttons. Also, demands for Ellie's Originals ought to stay high, because her stuff is all that I'm accepting in trade for my scarce fancy buttons. As I get on my bus, lots of colorful new buttons from the playground are changing hands, and again, such active button trading surprises me. I'm starting to think that my big economics experiment had resulted in only one real change. I now have 4 fewer boxes of buttons at home in my bedroom, and of course, I'm still missing one best friend. Chapter 23, Into the Secret. I am almost home on Wednesday afternoon, and my phone rings. The name Hank comes up on the screen. I don't really want to talk to him, but I also don't want to be rude. Hi, Hank. Hi, I just got home. I compared the buttons I picked up on the playground today to some of the buttons I got from your tray on the first day we all brought stuff, and I'm pretty sure that they are the same buttons. I don't say anything, so he keeps talking. The colors, the materials, the sizes, the designs, they're all the same. And there's a tiny mold mark on the back of some of the dark red buttons, and the mark on the ones I got from you is identical to the mark on the ones I picked up outside the field today. Interesting. Yes, interesting. So I think you spread those buttons on the field at school, and I'd like to know if that's true. I'd also like to know if this is part of your war against Ellie. I'd rather not say. Oh, okay, fine. Have a nice day. Wait, don't hang up. I'm still here. You're right. I did put the buttons around the playground, but it's not part of my war with Ellie. It's an experiment to see if I can stop the fad. I want it to stop. And you think flooding the school with more buttons is supposed to make them disappear? That doesn't make any sense. Well, Ben told me some stuff about supply and demand, and if the supply of something goes way up, then the demand is supposed to go way down. For example, if there were thousands of donuts everywhere, people would get sick of them and wouldn't want them as much. Yeah, I see how that might work with donuts, but what if this fad is more like a forest fire, and you just added a lot more trees? Like I said, it's an experiment. Right, I get that, but how many buttons did you put on the field? I almost say I'd rather not talk about it, but I don't. Can you come over here? To your house now? Yes, now, to my house. When the doorbell rings, Mom and I get there at the same time. Hi, Mrs. Hamlin. Hi, Grace. Hank's out of breath from his bike ride, and I'm glad it took him a while to get here. My clothes are all put away for the first time in weeks. Come on in, Hank. It's nice to see you. He nods my mom. Thanks. Good to see you too. She's a little surprised, but I didn't tell her that he was coming. Hank came over to see my collection in my room, and if we want any snacks, we'll get them on ourselves, okay? Sure, that's fine. I'll just be in my office. My room looks less messy now, but my closet is still a wreck, so I moved 3 boxes of buttons out of there and stacked them in front of my tall bookcase. Hank stands still, just inside my door, and slowly looks around. It's been a long time since I had a new friend in my room, but no one else really paid attention to my stuff. Hank looks like he's scanning every single object, sort of the way my new phone takes a panoramic photo. He points at my dresser. I'd recognize those anywhere. He walks over and picks up the blue glass jar full of small gray buttons. I've got at least this many at my house, the exact same buttons. Yeah, I dumped a lot of them on the playground. So yeah, you got them from the mill, right? In Massachusetts? Good guess. More like a deduction. You showed me some buttons along with the other stuff you got from the mill, so I figured you must have gotten more than you brought to school. And from the start, you've always had plenty. Plus, you've never seemed worried about giving buttons away. He nods at the stack in my bookcase. Are there more in those boxes? Yes, more buttons. So how many buttons did you dump at school? 4 boxes. Wow, and you still have 3 huge boxes left? Actually, you should look under my bed. No, really? Really. Hank drops to the floor, lifts the dust ruffle, and lets out a long, low whistle. Whoa, is it okay if I pull some of these out and see what you've got here? Sure, you can look at all of them. I sit back in my big encyclopedia armchair as Hank opens box after box, and I now know how my mom and dad feel when they watch me opening presents. On his 4th box, Hank finds some fancy buttons. Look at these! I can't believe it! Yeah, I love those, and I've got 2 other boxes like that. Alright, we're going to stop here. Kind of in the middle of the chapter, but we will be back again tomorrow. Hope you have a great Wednesday.